And so I think there's this misconception of like what gifting is. It's like nobody cares about gifts,
but
everybody cares about relationships. And it's really how you're showing up for people and showing them that they matter. Like everybody wants to be appreciated and known. Even billionaires want their life and their legacy to have mattered and for them to have meant something more than a dollar sign to their relationship.
This is BetterWealth with Caleb Williams. John Ruhlin, welcome finally to the BetterWealth podcast.
Caleb, man, thanks for having me. It's gonna be fun.
I couldn't even wait to share this with you. So this is going to be the second time I'm sharing the story within like 5 minutes. But your book, your philosophy, totally had a radical impact on my life. So those of you that know my story know that I got into the financial service space at a very young age, 21 years old, started my practice. I'm a nobody. I'm living at home. My office lease was on the basement of a Papa John's building. You had to walk down the stairs to get to $300 a month. And I'm trying to figure out how to grow this business. I know I have this message that needs to be shared, but I'm like, what do I do? And someone gave me your book. And I read it, and I was terrified when I read it because I'm like, man, I think he's right, but I'm kind of like, everything that I've learned about marketing has been like, put your logo on something and do like the give and take kind of deal.
Yeah.
And you encouraged me to be like the real, and I'm gonna give a spoiler alert here, but it's like get the Giftology method is like, don't think about yourself, like through gratitude, put other people and like embed yourself. And I want you to break that down. But like I took that to heart and have been a follower of your philosophy. And I have a couple stories of people that I just thought like, what would be the most significant gift that would bless them? And as a result, it's been amazing to see that. And so with that, thank you so much. You've been someone that I've really wanted to have on the show, mainly because I think about money differently. I very much think we need to reverse engineer from result and outcome. And a lot of people, John, are investing in things that literally will not get them closer to where they want to go.
No.
And there's a lot of business owners that listen to my show and like they're investing in quote unquote marketing and things that are not helping them get the result that they want. And I sincerely mean this. I think if people understand what you wrote about in the book and what you do for a living, that it's like the ninja secret to how to better position yourself and selfishly grow your practice. So how's that for an intro?
I'll take it all day long, man. It's thank you for the genuineness and just the heartfelt. And like I shared, it's one thing to write the book. It's one thing to have a gifting agency that does it for companies and leaders, but to see people that are inspired without me even interacting with them, go take, what was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over decades and actually go do it at a high level and then reap the rewards and the results and the deeper relationships that everybody's longing for. It just, my wife sometimes like, are you doing another interview? Like, how many people still haven't heard this message? Like, you get paid to speak on these big stages to teach people to be kind and thoughtful. Like, that's the radical thoughts, but it's so funny to see people that really are like come up in tears or come up and say, hey, like you saved my business. Like my business was going to crash. Like I was out and I did what you taught and it saved the company. And so I'm just humbled at a really deep level that we're able to have the impact. And thanks for doing what you're doing.
But John, I love the power of story. And I think the way that you got into this and just the epiphany that you had is worth the story in background, but I also think it sets up your message so powerfully. So go back. How did you get started in this? I know that you weren't born with this brilliant idea, but you learned it through just experience. So why don't you break that down?
Yeah, well, I a lot of times people hear the title or the level of clients that we work with. So we have a lot of startups and small companies, but we also have like the Chicago Cubs as clients, and people are like, oh, John got born in LA or New York in the right home. His dad maybe was the commissioner or a VP of sales at a big company. But I grew up in Ohio, Midwest farm kid on 47 acres, really lower middle income. I was a kid like collecting free lunch at school because we were like on a one income, I was milking goats every morning. I was one of 6 kids. Like I grew up wanting the Jordans, but I was like getting the hand-me-downs from the garage sale. and nothing wrong with that. But it made me hungry to want more because the town was 400 people. I was like, I want to get out of Dodge. So I was going to go make my mom proud. She was into health and wellness before it was cool to be a, granola, shopping that Whole Foods kind of person. And, which is really rare for her, like in that time period. But I was going to go be a DO or a chiropractor. I was going to be a doctor. And my life changed because I went and got a job. I had an internship really with Cutco, the knife company, out of desperation to pay for med school. I didn't know about the knives. But I found out how much they were. They're like $10,000. I almost didn't do it. But my buddy, who was a seminary student, who was the worst salesperson on the planet, was succeeding selling these knives. So I was like, if Steve Wiggers, who's going to go be a missionary, he's like 6'8", like bashful, like if he can do it, I can do it, or at least try. And so my fourth appointment changed my life forever. I went and pitched my girlfriend's dad, who was this rainmaking attorney, these knives. And the reason I pitched him was Paul was the guy that was like a referral machine. Like he was this guy that attracted all this amazing deal flow. And he was also super generous. So when you're poor, you grow up poor, you see people generous, that stands out immediately. And he would find deals on noodles and stupid stuff. And he'd buy a semi-load. Like most people would be like, oh, I'll buy a case. No, Paul buys the whole truck. And so like 200-300 people are walking away with like 20 cases, like a year's supply of noodles. And I'm like, Paul, like I'm doing the math in my head. I'm like, that's like a minimum of 40 grand. I'm like, are you crazy? But that's just who he was. It wasn't a tactic for him. He just showed up for people that way. And because of it, he was the most liked, trusted, top of mind person in the entire community. So I pitched him knives thinking maybe he'll have mercy on me and order, Cutco makes these $100, $200 pocket knives. They're handmade in New York, like expensive knives. And so I asked him, Paul, what do you think? And he got this smile on his face. He was 60 at the time. I'm 20 at the time. So this is 20 years ago. And he's like, John, I don't want to order pocket knives. Got to order paring knives. And I'm like, you want to give a bunch of grown men CEOs of $1 million, $10 million, $100 million, $1 billion companies like a kitchen tool? I'm like, why? And he said, John, the reason I have more referrals, the reason I have more deal flow, the reason I have more access, the reason I'm the most top of mind person is that I figured out something simple in business. And that's if you take care of the family, everything else seems to take care of itself in business. So for me as a 20-year-old, like this was like a mind-blowing, like, oh my gosh, it wasn't about the stupid knives. So to this day, people like New York Times are like, what's the hot, sexy gift, John, at your agency? And I laugh. I'm like, the stupid knives. And they're like, come on, like, no way. Like, that's what you did 20 years ago in college. I'm like, you want to know how we got the Chicago Cubs? The stupid knives. You want to know how we got Darrell Horton, the largest builder in the country? Stupid knives. You want to know what they're giving out to their relationships? Oftentimes the stupid knives. Because at a core level, all human beings, whether you make 20 grand or 2 million or 200 million, what do we do when we get together? We invite our inner circle over to our house, to the kitchen, and we break bread and we have food and wine. That's central to, even in 2021, it's even more so like COVID stuff. People are cooking at home more. They miss that intimacy. And so the knives become this tool, this artifact that becomes woven into the fabric of their family. And so it sounds weird. People are like, really, the knives? But for Paul got it immediately. And so he ordered 100 of these paring knives. They're like $100, $200 a piece paring knives, not cheap. And so I started to mimic what Paul was doing because I was like, I want to be him when I'm 60. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, I got 40 years to get there. And by the time I was a senior in college, I had put med school on hold and started this gifting agency and started working with, solopreneurs all the way up to billion-dollar companies, teaching them and showing them and doing for them, they would outsource it to us, how to love on their employees, clients, partners, investors, mentors. And we started getting introduced into pro sports teams, whatever else. But Cutco has worked with about 2 million sales reps in 70 years. We became their number one in the history of the company. This country bumpkin farm kid, by talking about and teaching and using Giftology is what we now call
it. There's so many areas that I want to go, but I just want to highlight, especially if you are in business and you're working with like companies that you get products from or other things, we've all got the popcorn or the chocolate, or this is my favorite one. Okay. This $1 billion company sends me this $5 umbrella with their logo on it. I'm not going to swear here, but I'm like, okay, you're better off just not saying anything. And by the way, it's included with a general typed note that's probably sent out to everybody. And so it's like, it's interesting. It's like, why don't these companies get it? Like, do they actually think that helps them? Do they actually think that creates more loyalty?
I think they do at some level. I also think, it's like nobody gets fired for hiring McKinsey, the big consulting firm. Why? Because that's like, nobody gets fired for going and sponsoring a trade show. Nobody gets fired for doing Facebook ads. Like none of those things are necessarily wrong. Like McKinsey's a great firm, but people tend to play it safe. And in business, like most people, it's like, I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to look silly. What is everybody else doing in my industry? Oh, they're doing that, so I'll do that too. So what does everybody do? Everybody has a mastermind. Do they differentiate it? Some do and make it really special, but most people are sheep and they do it exactly the same as everybody else. And gifting is that same way. They look around and see everybody else with these branded stuff. They're like, well, we got to have stuff at a trade show. We got to send our clients something at Christmas. Why? Because that's tradition. Everybody does it. And so I think that nobody ever is honest with how they actually feel when they receive something like that. Nobody says, I'm actually less likely to do business with you when you sent me that bottle of wine and I don't even drink. Or you sent me that bottle of wine and it's $50 and my daily drinker is $150. Right. Or that umbrella, like, you want to be green, stop giving me crap that ends up in the landfill in 5 months, or ends up at Goodwill, or ends up in, falling apart. Nobody writes that in a letter. Like, I thought less of you as a human when I received this.
Yeah.
What do? They say thank you, or they don't say anything at all. Yeah. And so I think there's this misconception of like what gifting is. It's like nobody cares about gifts, but everybody cares about relationships. And it's really how you're showing up for people and showing them that they matter. Like everybody wants to be appreciated and known. Even billionaires want their life and their legacy to have mattered and for them to have meant something more than a dollar sign to their relationships, their employees, their clients, whatever else. So it's a weird, I think it's weird on a lot of different levels, but I think, the bottom line is everybody does it because everybody does it.
Yep. I want to highlight you and a good friend of both of ours, Pete Vargas. Number one, Pete has helped me understand the power of relationships, and I've been starting to do dinner parties with the sole focus of building relationship and like hearing people's stories and the power of vulnerability, and I'm just so grateful for that. I remember going to a workshop by a guy named Ruhlin Fraser. Ring a bell at all?
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking like, man, this guy is super connected. Like he's got one of the largest digital marketing conferences. He's like getting equity deals because he's helping people buy and sell companies. Like very powerful person. I'm grateful to have met him. And I remember like scrolling through my Facebook, seeing him unwrap a gift, and you and Pete, I believe, got him this like crazy nice Cutco knife set. And you engraved on each knife a quote. And I'm like, John, that is the most ninja thing. You've literally, that will be passed down to 3 or 4 generations easily.
Yeah. Roland could buy his own knives. That's what people don't understand. It's not about that knife set was $5 or $6 grand all in. People are like $5 or $6 grand. I'm like, you'll spend $5 or $6 grand on drinks over the course of a week in Vegas, buying people dinners and whatever else. People may or may not remember that a week from now.
Yep.
You'll spend $50,000 on marketing this, or $150,000 on hiring an employee that may or may not work out. One employee, but you won't invest in a relationship like Roland, who's a baller across all of these industries. And Pete and I split it, so $3 grand each. But it wasn't about the knives. Like Roland could buy 100 of those knife sets. The knife set, it's world class, it's handmade, blah blah blah. But it's the delivery vehicle for the emotion. The emotion came because every knife on both sides. So there was 80 quotes of wisdom that Roland had spoken out. And, like when you take somebody's legacy and their wisdom and what they've put out into the world and put it onto a piece that his kids and grandkids are going to see, you could do that same, I could send that same thing to whether it's 100 people or 1,000 people or 50 people, and every person would receive it the same way that Roland did. Like he FaceTimed and talked about it. And now he's ordering knife sets to send out to people at that level. Because he's like, John, it wasn't about the knives. I already had these Japanese shun, blah, 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 that cost me thousands of dollars. Guess what? They're not even being used anymore. Why? Because the one that was made personally for him and his family, tied to his legacy, becomes the conversation starter. Now people are coming over to his house and he's showing them the knife set and the knives are being talked about. And so everybody wants referrals without asking. Well, you have to put a stake in the ground. There needs to be a trigger, an artifact, something that reminds the people around the people to talk about you and tell the story. Like it's always about the story. It's not about the thing. It's not about spending more money than your competitors. I could have sent them a nicer, more expensive whether it's a bottle of wine or a Louis Vuitton bag or whatever, like people will spend more money. It's not more money. It's more thoughtful. It's more creative. It's more strategic. That's how you win and compete with people that are 100 times bigger than you.
Yeah, I'm kind of in two camps because our main business helps consumers take back control of their wealth, but I also ironically coach quite a few financial advisors on how to be more successful and scale their business. And I learned about this practice. A lot of people are buying $200 leads and having a 10% close rate on those. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm missing something, John, here, but I'm like, I think I could spend $200 a more effective way. And so the reality is people are spending their money on marketing because I think majority of people would say marketing is important because if you don't have marketing and you don't have new clients coming in, it's a problem. So we're not arguing about spending money to make money. It's how you do that. And I've heard you multiple times say you're a math guy, which kind of you could challenge because you're like, oh, really? Because you drop $5,000 on a knife set. Like, how is that a good idea? So talk to us through the philosophy. If you were to coach me, or if you were to sit down with a business, how would you walk them through the blueprint? I know that you have a special gift that you're going to give all of our audience that wants to get this, that walks them through this. But I just want to hear from you, like 101, not something I have to memorize. How do I actually understand this so it's like just like the back of my hand?
It's actually a lot like financial services. Like you invest money, percentage of whatever you're taking in, you should pay yourself first. That's 10% or 20% or whatever else. Like you invest it and you put it somewhere, and over time, whether that's over 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, like you're wanting that stock or that mutual fund or that Bitcoin or whatever to appreciate, to like grow in value. You view it as, and in business, it's the same way. I'm going to invest in this employee, but because I hired these employees, I'm now going to be able to service more clients and I'm going to be able to grow my revenue. Like we're all like looking for investments. Most people view a lot of gifting as an expense, as I have to do this. And what's interesting is when you go into it with that mindset, you end up putting that level of value on it. It's like, oh, I have to do this, so I'll send peanut brittle at Christmas or whatever, or I'll send my logoed crap or my gift cards or my referral gifts. What people don't understand is that marketing, the best marketing comes from your relationships that you already have. And so if I'm coaching somebody that, is a financial advisor or an author or a CEO, I'm like, hey, we need to do a 360 view of all of your warm current relationships, your employees, your clients, your investors, your mentors, your banker, centers of influence, whatever, media. And what right now, let's say you made 100 grand this year in profit. You should be taking a percentage of that and investing it back into your business. Well, what's that? Well, you're investing into the relationship. So our rule of thumb is 5 to 15% of net profits should be reinvested back into your relationships that are most important. So many people want to go after prospects. Prospects are cold. It's like if you took a fire there's no fire, it's just wood, and you pour gasoline on it, what happens? You just have wet wood. But if you take a fire that's small and burning and you pour gasoline on it, what happens? It becomes this like inferno. And so most people want to go after the whales they don't have versus loving on the relationships they currently have. And if you do this right, you take that 5 to 15%. People are like, man, John, that's a lot of money. That's 5 to 15 grand if I made 100 grand last year as a small business owner. I'm like, you get to keep 85 grand. You're basically investing in people, they're buying their own gifts. You're taking a percentage of net. I don't care what your revenue is. People talk, oh, I did $100 million in revenue. I'm like, what did you profit? They're like 500 grand. I'm like, great. That's the number we're going to use. Don't give me the fluff. Because this has to be bootstrapped. This has to be cash flow. This has to be, so you take that 5 to 15 grand, reinvest it into your top, let's say 50 relationships. Now, next year, if you do the right thing with those relationships and you have a good business, like you can't have a sucky service or a sucky product or a sucky whatever, and then give great gifts and think they're magically, like you have to still run the other parts of your business. This is the cherry on top of sundae. And this is like why Roland will go out of his way to open up doors on stages and advocate. If I wanted to hire Roland, who I did the nice set for, as a sales rep, I could, if I paid him $2 million, he'd say no. But because I loved on him and inspired him, he'll go advocate for me and he'll be a better sales rep than somebody I paid millions of dollars to because he wanted to, he chose to, there's a connection and a relationship there. And so that's why, like, when people are like, oh, John, that doesn't make sense. I already have good retention. I'm like, this isn't a retention ploy. Like most people, their financial advisors have above a 90%. But what I challenge anybody on the planet in any industry is, do you have more referrals than you can handle? My guess is you don't. And the only way that you get that is either you go buy them, which you pay a lot of money to Google or Facebook or whatever else, $200 a lead, and you close 1 out of 10. That's $2,000 you invested to get that one relationship. Whereas if you would go love on the people that already like you and show up for them repeatedly with that 5 to 15 grand, now all of a sudden you have people that they stay, then they grow, and then they start to go tell their friends and family, not just in a passive way. They're going actively. They're not saying, they're not waiting for somebody to ask them about you. They're going out and saying, you got to talk to this guy. And that's where people are like, John, how did you land like Google as a stage? And how'd you land an $85,000 speaking gig? I'm like, I didn't sell it. My clients, my friends, the people that love me went out and became my sales rep and opened the door, and opened doors I really didn't deserve to be in. Roland's done it. Pete's done it. I mean, Pete talked, we talked about it. I don't pay him to talk about me. And he talks about me on almost every keynote on the biggest stages in the world.
Yeah, it's obnoxious, actually. It's
crazy.
Like,
people text me, like, what did you pay him to do this? I'm like, 0.
Yeah.
So that's the marketing that works. You want, like, gift marketing is not the cheesy swag crap. It's not peanut brittle at Christmas. It's loving on your relationship in such a way that they can't help. God's wired us, whether you believe in a God or not. We want, we're tribal. And when somebody does something nice for us over and over again, we want to reciprocate. Most people give and then they ask. I mean, even Vaynerchuk, he's not, I don't know that he's a person of faith. He's a person who loves kindness and empathy and like the faith values. But what was his book called? Jab, 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 right hook. He understood and understands that you give. You don't play this 6-month game. Like, the long game is not days, it's decades. And most people are playing this like, oh, I sent this gift, I better get this. That's not a gift, that's a manipulation.
Yep.
It's a bait and switch. And the other person, by the way, if they're affluent, they can read through the lines. So I tell people all the time, if they're going to hire our firm, unless they commit to doing it for 3 years, don't hire us. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, you won't take my money? I'm like, no, because you're going to do this for 6 months. You're going to ruin it, and you're going to damage your relationships versus playing the long game and getting the 10x and the 100x and the 1000x return on relationship. I don't care what your ROI is. What's return on relationship? That's always way bigger than anything you're going to get from a Facebook ad or some marketing tactic, because you're investing in human beings.
Yep. A couple of things. So we do a book club each month, and 3 months ago we did the Go Giver. Last month, Last month we did Give and Take by Adam Grant, and this month we're doing the Thank You Economy by Gary Vaynerchuk. Do you see a theme? I think your book is next. By the way, awesome. I want to embed thoughtfulness and gratitude and the give. Like, I want givers on the team, not only for ourselves, but so that we can like have a culture and serve people like crazy. I know that you do some pretty radical things for your team, and your big challenge, which was convicting to me, is like the people that you need to give first to are the people that you're in the trenches with.
Yeah.
And again, it's man, there's just so many things I want to say, but what are your 2 cents on that as it relates to like giving to the people that are really moving the needle, which is your team? And then I also want to just say that I believe Chet Holmes is one of the most brilliant, marketing minds out there. And he made this thing called, the Dream 100. And I think it's a form of what you're doing, but he's really focused on like, how do you create a campaign and win deals? And I believe what you're saying is a little bit different. You're saying, instead of going out, go within, and you have better leverage if Johnny, who's a raving fan, talks about you versus you saying, I'm amazing.
Yep. Yeah. If you can get the person internally that's a client or a center of influence or a mentor or advisor or whatever, even your bankers, like I send gifts, we buy millions of dollars of Cutco. I send gifts to Cutco that are nicer than most people give their best clients that are $1 billion clients. And people are like, why did you do that? I said, I learned early on from another mentor. They were the largest buyer of Rolexes in the country. And when Rolex came to town, they bought the dinners. And I'm like, you're spending tens of millions of dollars of Rolex. Why would you do that? And like, we don't have a business without Rolex. We value our partners. We value our suppliers. Most people treat their suppliers like crap and expect things from them. I would rather show up for my suppliers. So when I need a favor, I need them to go the extra mile. And guess what? We have a real relationship built on trust and appreciation and gratitude, not just talking. Everybody says, "Oh, thank you. Thank you for your time." Those are the most empty words on the planet. Your time is your most valuable asset. Like if you don't show up for people and at least handwrite a note after somebody gives you their time, like it's embarrassing. And so everybody says, "Oh, I appreciate your time." Like, okay, show me with your time and with your talent and with your leverage. And so early on, when I was, in my 20s, I would send like $300 to $500 Cutco knife sets after a meeting with somebody for 5 minutes. And these guys are worth millions or billions. And when I sent that, like people responded, like these guys would reach out and be like, "John, this is the night. Like I spent 5 minutes with you." And I'm like, "Your 5 minutes was probably worth 10 grand. So I'm still in debt to you." But I wanted to say, "Thank you for your time." I want to show with real gratitude and real investment. And that just, guess what? Next time I phone them, even if it was 3 years later, guess what? I got the phone call back immediately because there is a understanding because it showed up differently. So as far as employees go, I think most people treat their clients or their partners or their prospects at like the Ritz-Carlton level. And then their employees, they treat them like the Motel 6. It makes zero sense. You want your employees to deliver Ritz-Carlton level service. If they've never stayed at the Ritz-Carlton, guess what? They don't know what that looks and feels like. So I'm a big believer in you'll create bitterness if you go love on your external relationships at a certain level. And then internally, like you're like Ebenezer Scrooge, where you're like, "Oh, we can't do that." I'm like, most people will hire their employees. And let's just say they're an entry-level person making 35 grand. Well, when they get hired, the salary range was 35 to 45 almost every single time. That's a $10,000 delta that you don't even think twice about when you're hiring somebody. That's overhead for every year for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 10 grand. So what we said is we're going to take part of that 10 grand and we're going to reinvest it back into our employees. And so one of the things we realized that a lot of them are working remotely. They have been for 12 years for us. They're, college educated, stay-at-home moms, they have kids, husbands, whatever else. They don't have time. What can we do that they'd never do for themselves to give their time back for their hobbies, for their kids, for their exercise, whatever. And so we started to pay to have their houses cleaned every other week. Now, most people would say, like, "Here, employee, you can take the cash or you can take this perk." Well, every employee, especially moms, they always put everybody else first, or just in general. So they take the cash and apply it to bills and whatever else. But if you say, like, "I really want to show up for my employees in a way that they'd never show up for themselves and make their life better, not in the business, but at home, their marriage, like we'll pay, somebody's having a rough time, like we'll pay for marriage retreats, we'll pay for because you want to show up for you want to have like an employee that's not focused, that's a drain on your culture, put them through a divorce. Like even selfishly, like the people are like 25, how much does it cost to pay an employee's house cleaning every year? I'm like $2,500. Like, even Google was like, "How do you afford that?" I'm like, nobody brags about their 401k anymore. That's table stakes. Nobody brags about their health insurance. Nobody brags about the polo shirt that you gave them as a gift with a logo on it, or their uniform, I'm like, when you can show up for people in a way that is unique and different and makes their life better, now all of a sudden they're able to go out when you're loving on clients, they get excited about saying, "How can we?" So my team is always looking for crazy things to send to each other, to send to clients. Like they're part of the culture, and we're not perfect. Like there's some times where people have bad days and employees are angry with each other or me or whatever else. Like we're human beings, we're broken.
Yeah.
But when you can show up for your internal client, not with some stupid tchotchke or token or, "Hey, you've been here 5 years. Here's your catalog of crap to pick from." Yeah. It's embarrassing. They worked for 10,000 hours. That's 5 years times 2,000 hours a year. And most of the gifts are under $100 and they're like with a logo on it and they come from China. It's like a pen and pencil set. Are you serious? I send nicer gifts to my interns that aren't even employees yet.
Yep.
I'll send them $500 headphones saying, "Hey, when you're studying for finals, we want to help you block out the noise, go crush it." People are like, "That's a lot of money." And I'm like, what do you spend in recruiting costs?
That's right.
I would much rather invest in people when they're not expecting it versus like waiting for somebody to work for some magical time period of 10 years or 20 years to get the gold watch. Like find a way to give them the gold watch in year 3, just because. Don't wait. Like that doesn't work anymore.
Man, let's talk about the do nots, because again, I am like very grateful that I got this early on. Have you read the book Dream Weaving? about radio advertising?
No.
I'm going to share this concept because I grew up in the banking world. So at like 18, 19 years old, I'm like doing marketing for our community bank. And what's interesting is because you're a community bank in a small town, every nonprofit's hitting you up for money. And what they would do, and I think it's pretty brilliant, although I'm not a huge fan of the radio advertising on the radio, is they would say, we're not going to give you money, but what we're going to do is we've made a deal with these radio stations. We're going to do an ad for you. We're going to do an ad for you, push your event, help you raise money, and it not to be about us. Because it's like, what are we going to say? Our money's greener, or like our interest rate, we become a commodity. And so I was maybe primed for thinking like this. And then when reading your book, it was like, okay, the two don'ts, like don't put your logo on things. Like, oh, John, how will people know it's from you? And then the second thing is, don't send gifts on your birthday and Christmas.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, I love that concept because they're leveraging they're taking an asset that most people would never get access to, like the nonprofits, and they're making it easy to make them look good. And in doing so, like they look good. What people don't understand is like, if I give you a Rolex, do I have to put my logo on it for you to remember where it came from? No, you're going to get the Rolex. And I have a client who sends Rolexes out like they're candy. He engraves them with Bible verses and thoughtfulness. And like these people are now like looking at their wrist every single day, and there's no logo, but they're thinking, man, I love that guy, subconsciously even. Now you don't have to spend 10 grand in order to do that. Like if you give a world-class thing that's personalized to the person, that's why the knives work. That's why like we do these crazy things called artifact mugs. They're like a mug. I'm like, these mugs are $1,000 and they do more than a $50,000 watch. Here's why. The mug carved into it is somebody's legacy, life story, family, faith, tragedy overcome, original mentors. I've seen billionaires. When I speak on stage, I'll sometimes surprise people in the audience with one of these mugs. And it's an instant tearjerker for the entire audience. And the recipient is usually bawling. Why? Because it's all about them. Every time they use that mug, they're reminded of who gave it to them. Even subconsciously, that's how God's wired us. It's like, so if you give a crappy gift, if you give a gift card, hey, here's a piece of plastic, go buy your own gift. That's not a gift. That's an obligation. That's like gift guilt. Like, oh, I got to go spend this now. But if you show up for people with something that's really thoughtful, really meaningful, you include like the knives and the mug and different things include their family, become a part of their family. Now, you don't, like 20 years from now, they're still telling the story of where they got it, when they got it, how they loved it, who that person is, because there was thoughtfulness and meaning. It's Seth Godin's concept of being a purple cow. Most people give the same stupid wine or the same gift cards or the same polos or the same, and they give it at expected times. Everybody says, even if I ask a toilet paper salesman, hey, are you in the transaction business or relationship business? Everybody's like, oh, we don't sell price, we sell value. We're all about relationships. There's 500,000 financial advisors out there, literally, that all say, oh, we're all about, we're all about wealth and strategy and not commoditized. And everybody says the same crap. But when you show up for people a certain way, and you don't do it at transactional times, like I want to let clients send referral gifts. And they're like, what are you talking about? This client gave me a referral. I want to send a referral gift. I'm like, are you in the relationship business? They're like, yep. I'm like, if somebody sends you a referral that closes, let's say they have $1 million assets under management. For you, that means 10 grand a year for as long as they're a client. Let's say they stay for 10 years. That's 100 grand. And you think, oh, I'm Big Daddy. I'm going to send this $500 bottle of wine to the person who sent me the referral. What did you just turn that relationship into? A transactional relationship, a tit for tat. They didn't refer you to get the bottle of wine. Now, if you showed up for people, we say no anniversary, no ABC gifting, no anniversaries, no birthdays, no Christmas. If you want to do those, fine, but those are table stakes. It's like if you show up for your wife on Valentine's Day, like nobody gets brownie points for showing up for their wife on Valentine's Day. It's like, it's expected. But if you show up for your wife or your client or your employee on random Tuesdays a few times a year and say, not because of the money you spent, I'm sending this to you because I was thinking of you. Yeah. So when you can do that that's what we bring is you do that at scale. So I can send, and we do this all the time. We'll send 100 or 500 or 1,000 people the same gift. It's engraved differently. It's personalized. The handwritten note's different, but the item itself is the same. But it shows up on a random Tuesday in the middle of June. People are like, I didn't send a deal. It's not my birthday. I didn't send a referral. Why are you doing this? Yep. And the clients are like, just because. And they're like, it melts their face off. They don't even know what to do with it because they're like, nobody does that. Everybody gives gifts at expected times out of obligation. It's Christmas. I'm like, love Jesus, but I don't send gifts, and our clients don't send gifts at Christmas. People are like, what are you talking about? Like, you're a gifting company. How do you not send gifts at Christmas? I'm like, do you really want to compete with the 47 other gifts that they're on their conference table ready to collapse? No. Even a amazing gift is still one of 47 things. And they're stressed out, and they're eating and drinking themselves to death, and they're shopping for their own stuff. You want to be the purple cow. So we call it planned randomness. Show up 2 to 4 times a year for your best relationships. Yeah. And it's at unexpected times. It might be a random Tuesday in the middle of February, and then a random Tuesday in the middle of July, and a random Tuesday in the middle of October. And people that get it are like, oh my gosh, like, am I the only person that got this? Like, because it's not tied to anything other than the person. That's how you can take something thoughtful and scale it. But most people, like, even when they do it, they're like, John, it didn't work. I'm like, did you do Giftology? And they're like, well, I did Giftology-ish. And I'm like, go download giftologysystem.com. And that's our whole playbook. Yep. And you'll see in there that one of the parts of the secret ingredients is you better have a handwritten note with a gift. And like, does that matter? Can I just send it from Amazon? And I'm like, do you think relationships and depth and referrals, are those automated? No. You need to show it's from one person to one person. Even how you sign the card will determine whether or not they feel like you sent it to them or you sent it to the masses. And so many people are like, John, Giftology didn't work. I do the swag thing. And I'm like, it's not swag. I did the Giftology, didn't work. I'm like, you didn't follow the recipe. It's like baking bread. I don't care if you bake it 100,000 times. If you don't put yeast in every time, guess what? You don't get. You get matzah, you don't get bread. And so the little things are what, if you try to do that at scale, most people, they falter and then they don't get the results, and then they're pissed off. Yeah. But then they realize, oh, you're right. It's hard to do it at scale.
Yeah. Most people aren't thinking with the end in mind. Most people aren't having a long-term process. Like, I'm not a huge fan of compounding. Another mutual friend of ours, Garrett Gunderson, he's like, compound interest is overrated. But I will say this: compounded control, compounded relationships, anything consistent over a period of time. And if you can be consistent, it's game over. And that's what I see. I see Giftology not as a gift business, but more as like a coaching / gratitude will like help you run your business better. And oh, by the way, we do that by giving thoughtful gifts.
Yeah, it's a relation. I mean, like I said, people are like, Giftology, who cares? And they'll see me on big stages. Like, we spoke at top of the table in some of these places where, like, the top 1% or top 0.1% are there. And you can tell, like, people are getting ready to leave the auditorium. And I'm like, we're not going to talk about gifts, but we are going to talk about, are you getting as many referrals as you want? Are you retaining the employees that you want? Are you growing as fast as you want? You're not. Well, then you're probably not showing up for your relationships the way that is inspiring them to go act on your behalf. So you're right. It's not a gifting company. It's really a relationship building strategy company. Yep. And when you do that really well, good things happen.
So I want to pivot a little bit and get your philosophy on money 101. What does BetterWealth? What's your definition of BetterWealth? And what's interesting is there's a couple things that I've been like trying to articulate to my audience. Number one, my version of R.O.R is return on result. Like, again, reverse engineer, what result do you want? And then really wealth is efficiency and how to get that thing quicker. Yep. And then also I got wealthology.com was taken. I was probably the 14th person that read your book. I was like, oh, I'm going to try to get this domain, but valueleveraging.com wasn't. And here's my thought on like a book that's not been written yet is Wealth 101. Number 1, create value. Definition of value, like be life-giving to a person. Yep. Number 2, what's the definition of leverage? Create influence, maximize. Yes. And I very much see like you get that, you embody that, and it's like, oh, wealth is not about putting your money in this fund or overfunding life insurance or all these things that I'm like, okay, these are tactics which are fine. It really is create value and create it at scale. And so I want to hear how you think about money, because people might put you in the gift category, but I think you're a ninja when it comes to creating wealth. And I'm not going to ask you to disclose how much you're worth, but I bet your wealth has grown and skyrocketed because of how you think.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that I think of wealth as not just on money terms, because I think a lot of people that have money wealth may not have health wealth or have relationship. They have jacked up family, jacked up health. And so like, to me, one of the best investments from a money perspective is to invest in human beings.
Yep.
Like, to me, you know, and I'm not the first person to say this, but, you know, your network is your net worth, I think really plays, and it really plays during not just good times, it plays even better during the valleys. Because, you know, economically, like, we're always going to have blips and challenges. And, you know, like the idea of digging your well before you're thirsty, and like, who could you call at 3 a.m. if you needed 10 grand because you're, for whatever reason. And like, if you don't have a list of people that you've poured into that you'd be like, yeah, I could reach out to that person, then I think that, you know, life insurance and some of these other vehicles are awesome. Like, we use them, but I'm looking at relationships as like a long-term investment. And I feel like whether that's with my family, and, you know, I'm thinking multi-generationally, I'm thinking about my, you know, kids and grandkids and whatever else, and like wanting to be able to pass things on, and wanting to pass on not just money, but like thoughtfulness and how to think about human beings, and how to, you know, not end up with the relationship that's split up and divorced and all of these different things. So to me, like, money is, you know, is an awesome vehicle, but like, I think it was Warren Buffett who said, like, you know, true success is like the people who are closest to me love and respect me the most. And so like, as I'm building out this platform, I'm trying to remain grounded. My wife is constantly reminding me, like, Jad, you really have to go do that, or whatever else. Cause like, I think sometimes as we're thinking about wealth, it's like, oh, I got to make it as big as possible. And it's like, no, like, if we're playing the long game, yeah, we got to hedge our bets and make sure if something, you know, get hit by a bus, that we're covered to take care of our family. But I think a lot of times, most of us are going to live to 70, 80, 90 years old or beyond, and not investing in the human beings along the way is a big, in my opinion, mistake. And the people I see that love life the most when they're older, it all comes down to their, you know, their closest relationships. That's who they want to spend time with. And so that's my focus.
So you can go to giftologysystem.com to download the playbook. And thank you, because I know that you charge a lot of money to do this when you consult people one-on-one in big companies, and you're willing to give that to my audience. So anything to expect, and why someone should go download that?
Well, I think, you know, like, if you have a marketing plan or an operations plan or a finance plan or a workout plan or whatever, like, those are like, you have a plan because you're like, yeah, this is important to me. Most people, if you ask them what their relationship plan is, especially in their business, maybe they have one for their spouse or their kids. They don't have it for their clients. They might have a marketing plan of like, hey, we got to send this note or this brochure or whatever, and that's all fine. But to me, to not have a plan of who's most important, what's important to them, what's their spouse's name, what could I afford? Like, most people say, what's the least I can get away with? And my original mentor, Paul, was like, what's the most I can afford to invest in these relationships? Yep. Like, how much more could I do? Yep. And so that entire recipe is there. It's none of it's rocket science, but it's all the little pieces. And like, the seventh step is the gift. Most people start with, especially guys, we're the worst. So like, we shop with our eyes. We're like, what's the cool, sexy gift? I like wine. Let's send wine. And so that's the delivery vehicle is the last part. So that planning process and understanding, whether you hire somebody to do it for you or whether you do it on your own, you still have to identify the key relationships and do some of the homework in order to actually execute on the plan.
John, if in 2 minutes, can you explain what you're doing for the Kobe Bryant project and Make-A-Wish? Because I'm blown away, and it's like, I think just by sharing the story, I think people are gonna start thinking like, oh, this guy is a practitioner, and like, you're compounding your relationships at a whole new level.
Yeah. Well, I love unique gifts. You know, I like the crazy, I love things that scale, but I also love the crazy one-offs that don't scale. You know, the $7,000 Brooks Brothers experience wasn't scalable, but it was cool and it produced awesome results. So this artist that was making different things for me, she takes pieces of broken history, artifacts, baseball bats, whatever else. She does stuff for like Albert Pujols. She makes these beautiful pieces of art that are like of the art of the person or of the family. And we just did one for Sarah and Jesse, Sarah Blakely, billionaire, and Jesse Itzler. After I spoke to like 14,000 CEOs for EO, we surprised them with this 7-foot tall piece made of Spanx packaging and broken records. And it was their whole family. It's a $25,000 piece of artwork that we surprised them from the stage. And they're big into art, and their jaws hit the ground. They're like, this is going to be in our main living room, because like, it's their family. It's them and their 4 kids. So this artist was making one when Kobe passed. She was going to make one of her, Magnus opus, like her like like she loved Kobe. And so this 9 foot tall piece made of all broken records of Kobe. And it's like lifelike. It looks like he's getting ready to dunk. But it's all thousands of pieces of it took hundreds of hours to make. And she was going to sell it for a lot of money, auction it off. And her and her husband's vehicles got stolen, and he's in construction, and all the equipment got stolen, and she's going to fire sale it. I'm like, like, this should be the piece that puts her on the map, because like she's an up and comer. People are starting to find out about her, boxers, Evander Holyfield, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to buy this. So we bought it for 33 grand. I'm like, I could keep it for myself. I could give it as a gift, or I could use it as a leverage tool to be able to put her in the spotlight. I can put Kobe's favorite charity in the spotlight, and we could get, raise money. And so we partnered with Make-A-Wish. We donated to them. So anything above 33 grand is going to Make-A-Wish. And so the thought is like, this piece will honor in thousands, hopefully thousands of kids will benefit. Even Kobe's gone, but his legacy carries on. And maybe it's athletes, maybe it's the owners of the Staples Center, but Kobe kind of like transcended all, like from basketball to business to movies to celebrities to music. And the fact that it's made of thousands of broken records, he obviously broke a lot of records, but people resonate with that. And so the hope is we'll auction off the piece, and then we're creating NFTs. So, they'll be minted on the blockchain, and people will be able to buy, and it'll bring the disadvantage. You normally could never buy $1 million piece of artwork. We'll actually be able to buy it for like $24, which was his number. And so the goal is to have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of people that have a piece of Kobe, but are also contributing to Make-A-Wish at this level of scale.
I'm telling you guys, be obsessed with the idea of leverage. I'm telling you, there's 10 different things that you're going to do through one decision. John, one of my favorite quotes, this was something that I was at a leadership conference, heard a guy named Andy Stanley speak, and he said, the value of your life is always measured by how much of it was given away. And he shared an example of the greatest leader of all time, Jesus Christ, and how he literally gave what like none of us could of his own life. And then he pretty much made just a statement off of that. He said, at your funeral, no one's going to care about your accomplishments, how much money you made. They're going to hold true to the things like the kind of person you were and what you gave of them. And I just wanted to share that with you, because when I think of that quote, you are someone that I think of when that one of the most impactful quotes, that's impacted me and made me want to do what I'm doing now. The last question I end all my podcasts with are what I call the legacy question. And this is your last day on earth. You're not able to give any gifts to the people that you love the most, your family. What are you going to make sure to pass on in that last conversation that embodies your life work and the thing that you want to be passed on?
Yeah. I what comes to mind is my daughter, who's 10. When she was 4, I asked her, like, what do you think Dad does for a living? And she's like, Dad, you help people love on people. And I was like, if that's my legacy, then I lived a great life. And hopefully that my kids and grandkids, and gets me teary-eyed to think about. But yeah, if that's what they take away, I'll have lived successfully.
John, thank you so much for taking your most valuable resource, your time, and being on my show. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
My pleasure, bro.
Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.